Welcome to ZKast, everybody. I'm Zias Caravallo from ZK Research. I'm your host, and I'm joined today by a very special guest, Bob Laliberte from ESG. Bob, this is your second time on ZKast, so welcome back.
Thanks very much. Great to be here.
Yeah, well, and I wanted you on this week because it's now earnings time for the network vendors, and you being one of the preeminent network analysts, I'd say the second best out there. I wanted to get your thoughts on things, and we had Extreme, Juniper, and Arista all announced earnings in the last couple of weeks. We got Cisco coming up, but let's start with Extreme. As has become a habit for Extreme, they posted another beat and raise. They posted revenues of $278 million, beating estimates by about 5%. This was up sharply, though, from the $215 million of a year ago, and the third time in 4 quarters they put up a beat. There was also a bit of a milestone because that revenue number put them over $1 billion for the first time. And it's something they've been guiding to for a while. It's just a number, but I do think $1 billion is kind of an interesting milestone for a company that, frankly, a lot of people thought was done a few years ago. They're also much more profitable today from an earnings perspective. They did 19 cents a share, which is a slight beat over what the street was expecting, but it's a marked improvement over the 3 cents a share from a year ago. The stock was down a little bit on earnings day, from what I remember, but the Needham put a buy rating on the stock, and the stock jumped 7%. I think the Needham analysis was pretty apt, and something we'll talk about, where they said that the gross margin pressures that are expecting across the next year can temper the stock a little bit, but then he does expect the company to flourish after that. So it's been a nice run for Extreme, right? They've been a leader in the Gartner Magic Quadrant now for quite some time. They were the first to ship Wi-Fi 6. They hired Calvin Rowland, I saw, from F5, who I think is a really smart guy. They added a bunch of new capabilities to Copilot. In fact, you and I attended an Extreme event at Fenway Park, right, and talked to some of their partners and customers, and the resellers and customers really love Extreme. And so this is a much different company than we've known in the past.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I would agree. I think they've made a lot of strategic moves in the companies that they've acquired, and in particular, when they brought on Aerohive and made that focus to be cloud-based management, it's really helped them propel their entire product line and driving that cloud-based management mantra across the entire product line, coming up with the universal hardware. I mean, that's always one of the big challenges with organizations when they acquire different sets of products, and they're doing a great job of normalizing that for all of their customers, supplying a unified end-to-end cloud-based management, and then applying, a really transparent AI solution in Copilot to help organizations comfortably adopt AI technology. And I say comfortably, right? Because it's always that your job's on the line. So you want to be confident that whatever you're automating is going to be correct. And so I think they've done a nice job with a lot of those things, and it's showing in their earnings. And like we said, when we met with their customers and with their partners, there's a lot of enthusiasm and momentum growing for Extreme right now.
Yeah, in fact, I did a ZKast a little while ago with Brian Shield, the CIO of the Sox, and he spoke volumes about Extreme, about how great the Wi-Fi was in stadium and things. And you brought up the Aerohive acquisition. They did a lot of acquisitions to get to this point, but that was the only one I thought they did that actually added new capabilities and wasn't just a consolidation play. And you also mentioned universal hardware, and for those of you watching here, that's actually really cool. At first, I thought it was just some marketing mumbo jumbo, but then Nabil walked me through it, and it is the ability to swap hardware like that and mix and match software and stuff is actually I don't know if any other vendor does that, but that's a really cool product.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Next up is Juniper. They also had a good quarter. They put up a strong revenue beat by about $30 million. They had a $1.17 billion quarter. They grew 8% year over year, 9% sequentially. It's good to see from Juniper. Juniper kind of ebbs and flows as telco goes historically, but they are becoming a much more of an enterprise player. The stock did fall 5% on that day based on Rahim's, their CEO's caveat, around the worldwide semi shortage. But it does seem to have its product strategy in place. I know you and I were talking on the prep for this that, why don't you go into some of the products that you like? They've made some great acquisitions.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think this is a company that's, again, I guess the word of the day for a lot of these companies is momentum. And I think Juniper's built a lot of momentum with the acquisitions that they've done. Like you said, they've always had this kind of a born in the cloud and raised in the enterprise type of thing, or telco and play. But the acquisitions they've made are directly going to impact that enterprise business and can help some of the telco as well. So the ones that have been most notable have been, obviously they had Apstra that they brought in from an intent-based management and being able to come in and help drive in that enterprise data center space. And then they've got Route 128 that they acquired for the SD-WAN. And probably most notable, and this was maybe a little bit longer ago, but was what really kicked off, I think, their buying spree and their innovation spree. And so I think a lot of us has referred to it somewhat as the mystification of Juniper. Yeah. And where they're able to take that Mist, in the same way that like Extreme did it with Arrowhive, they looked at Mist as, this is a platform that we're going to build on. We're going to drive across our entire platform, and it's going to bring and yield a lot of value to the customers. And I think that's what we're seeing, is that organizations are going in, they're taking a look at this Mist platform that's being applied across the Juniper ecosystem, and they're seeing how it can benefit them and drive greater operational efficiency. Because the reality today is that organizations, their environments, especially the network environments, are becoming a lot more complex than they were 2 years ago, right? Applications are distributed across data centers, multiple public clouds, edge locations. Workers are now distributed across your own corporate locations and home. So the network really has to tie all that together. And you obviously need to have solutions that can drive much greater operational efficiency so that the same resources can manage that much more complex environment. So I think those are the things that I see when I look at that, the innovative SD-WAN, the great intent-based networking from Apstra that they got for the data center, and also gives them an opportunity to go in brownfield opportunities as well, right? Because and they're going to keep it heterogeneous support. And then obviously the overlaying all of that is the Mist support and management, cloud-based management for all of it, and leveraging that AI technology as well. So I think some really positive things that we're seeing out of Juniper, and that's what's driving, I think, a lot of their momentum.
Yeah, in fact, Bob, what you said is was borne out, I think, in the numbers. That the fact that the data center and AI products each rose 28% respectively. Where if you look, I think WAN grew 2%. There was much less. And if you look at the segments, enterprise and cloud were up 12%. The service line was only up 2%. So Juniper is an enterprise company, which is a big shift for a company that has lived and died by telco. But I think telco is very, very lumpy, and so I think it's good for Juniper to level that out. But that was some good analysis by there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, third on our list, pecking order, was Arista, who reported this week. And very similar story, right, to Extreme and Juniper. They put up a good quarter. Revenue grew 30% to $707 million, even up 6% sequentially from the last quarter. They beat by about 3%, driven by strength in the cloud with the Cloud Titans, which is a historical stronghold for Arista. Just to give you some comparison, they did 707 this quarter. It was 540 million a year ago this quarter. So they're they are seeing some really strong year-over-year growth. I think one of the interesting milestones was that they noted on the call that they passed 50 million cloud network ports. So that's kind of an interesting milestone. They bought their way into cloud management as well. They did talk about drivers of the business going forward. While they are trying to be more enterprise, it is the Cloud Titans that drives Arista. They are seeing some uplift there by the 400 gig upgrade cycle. It still accounts for about 34 to 39% of their revenue. One of the things they noted with the 400 gig upgrade cycle is there's obviously a mix of 100, 200, 400 gig switches, which are often purchased together, right? So that creates a much bigger suite sale for them. But they did have a strong showing from enterprise software as well, and which includes the Cloud Vision, Big Switch Monitoring Fabric, Awake Security. So like Juniper that made that pivot from telco to enterprise, I think Arista's done a nice job making the pivot from Cloud Titan the enterprise. And I guess everybody wants the enterprise, don't they, Bob?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, well, that's as a need to expand, right? It's great to get your foothold and have that focus, but obviously that ability, everyone's seeing that the requirement is going to be to deliver an end-to-end solution. And again, because of that increased complexity, that need to have organizations be able to simplify the management. And so they're not going to want to go to different screens for the data center and the campus and the wireless and the WAN and so forth, right? So having that unified approach they're doing with their Cloud Vision, I think it's Cloud Vision 2021 is the latest incarnation of it. And so I think they're on the right track. It was actually great to see this week they also announced a new ultra low latency switch. So that was one of their claim to fames when they first came out was, hey, we're going to be the best performing switches. So it's good to see them get back to their roots and come out with the new technology around there to keep the competition going. I think it was after Cisco had scooped up Exablaze last year and starting to get that competition going. That always is good for the end users because it means there's going to be better products coming out as those organizations compete.
Yeah, one of the interesting things about Arista, which I don't think they get enough credit for, is the EOS, their OS architecture, is built in a way that they can just mix and match silicon. And if you think historically about companies that have tried to adopt new silicon, they wind up creating a whole new operating system. In fact, Force 10, a lot of people think their decision to try and use Fulcrum was the thing that killed that company, right? Because they were all Broadcom based, where Arista's never really had that problem. Whatever the latest silicon is, they can seem to get a box up first.
Yeah, they're a software company that has a networking problem. So.
Yeah. Yeah, no, they've done a nice job with that. So now, Bob, we saw some good numbers with some caution, right, with chips from Arista, Juniper, and Extreme. Now Cisco's coming up, right? Their quarter just ended. In fact, at time of recording, it literally just ended, last week. So any thoughts on what we might expect? Given the trend towards cloud management and stuff, the one thing I'm sure we're going to see is Meraki have a really good quarter. What are some of your thoughts on Cisco? If you put your crystal,
yeah. So it's where we say the forward-looking statements, right? We are not the disclaimer. With the expectation, seeing these other vendors doing well, my expectation will be we're going to see Cisco have a strong quarter as well. There's a lot of organizations that, as I mentioned, everyone is moving to this distributed cloud. We're seeing more organizations shift their applications and things like that. Everyone's working from home, so that's driving a lot of network need, and a lot of organizations that I'm seeing also are preparing for the return to work. I think that's maybe getting pushed out a little bit further, but a lot of organizations I've been talking to lately have been seeing, their Wi-Fi deployments and stuff like that, taking into consideration, well, what does this mean in this new hybrid work model? And so I think we're going to see that driven, and I think Meraki is obviously in a great place when you talk about cloud-based management. They were sort of the originators of that for the networking space and having that simple experience for deploying your wireless networks. So they're obviously very well positioned to help organizations do that. I think the other interesting thing about Cisco that we've seen this year is they've shifted away from just product announcements and product releases and started focusing on let's tackle some big hairy problems, right? And that's something you would expect from a company like Cisco and their size. So I think their last major announcement was all about the hybrid cloud. And it wasn't just a single product announcement, but there were, I don't know, I think you were part of that as well. There were probably half a dozen or more anyways that were, in tightly integrated solutions across their product line. So, having app dynamics tied into Thousand Eyes, tied into the Nexus dashboard and things like that, where again, trying to drive that end-to-end visibility across these highly complex and highly distributed environments. And so I'm seeing Cisco, stepping up to the plate and saying, hey, we're going to help our customers take on these big issues that they have and use the whole breadth and depth of our portfolio to help do that.
Yeah, in fact, that's what they should be doing, right? Like if Cisco gets into a feature by feature comparison of them versus Arista or them versus Extreme or something, then in a lot of ways they've already lost because people aren't understanding the big picture. And the one thing I've noticed over the last few years, particularly since Chuck's been CEO, is a lot of the political infighting we saw at Cisco isn't there anymore. So you don't have groups that are worried about taking share from other groups. In fact, I think having Meraki and Catalyst both roll up to Todd Nightingale was the best thing that could have done, because they're not competitive with one another. And so, you look at G2 and Todd and, folks like that, they work very, very well together. And I think that's been part and parcel, part of the reason they can put some of those broader initiatives in place, where I don't know if the company was really ready for that before, Bob.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I was just talking to a customer a couple of weeks ago that was deploying Meraki access points with Catalyst switches, which was one of those things you probably wouldn't have heard of a couple of years ago. And a lot of that was because it tied into their ACI core better.
Yeah.
And so having that flexibility to do that, having that new leadership and that new drive to focus on the solution and not so much on the individual product line competition, I think that's really benefited them.
Yeah, and as far as the chip shortage goes, Cisco buys chips in so much volume that I got to believe that they're pretty well prepared, at least through end of year, or not into part of next year. So.
Yeah, it's interesting to see. I think a lot of these organizations have put things in place to make sure that they're able to get through at least the end of the year. We talked earlier, right? I think it's been interesting to see Extreme, because they've really focused on their relationship with Broadcom and talked about that. So they seem to be in a pretty good position. And like I said, the others that have been reporting have been talking about that they're good till the end of the year. And hopefully by then we'll start seeing some of this chip shortage, some of the shortages catching up, some of the production catching up as they ramp things up and so forth. And who knows, people might even be able to buy a new car soon too. So.
Yeah, well, as long as Norman Rice is involved, Extreme is going to be on the better end of every deal they cut. So
there you go.
Yeah. Anyways, Bob, it's good to see networking still, despite the chip shortage. Obviously, this whole digital world we live in is becoming more network centric. So, this is an industry you and I have been covering for a long time. It hasn't always been this exciting, but we live in a network centric world now, so that's good to see. So anyways, Bob, thanks for joining me again. I'm ZKast Caraval. I want to give one quick shout out to eWeek, my media partner. And as always, these are done in conjunction with the eWeek eSpeak series. So on behalf of Bob, I'm ZKast Caraval. Thanks for joining me, and see you next week.